Welcome to Flesh and Pod, a Flesh and Blood podcast, breaking down weekly news and notes from the tournament scene, community drama, game strategy, and more. And now, here are your hosts, Derek and Logan.
Hello, and welcome to episode 156, and God, I'm tired. In a row of Flesh and Pod. It's 3 years, if you're counting. My name is Logan. I'm your host, and 100 of those weeks have been with Derek Oswald. I don't understand what has come over me to allow that to happen at this point. But thankfully, to blunt the trauma and graciously join us from the palatial offices of Legend Story Studios is Bryan Gottlieb. I'm going to see if I can get your title right. Senior game designer for Flesh and Blood. Did I nail it?
Yeah,
I got it right.
You got it. Well, that's one of them. Senior game designer and lead game developer, which I feel like over the course of this cast, I would like to talk more about what those two things mean, but we'll get to that.
No, that's fine. We can get to that. But I'm on mules tonight. We're drinking Bombay mules or London mules, depending on how you look at them, because I just felt like it was a gin night as well. But Bryan, again, thank you for joining us, man. It's probably been, you said it when we were just talking before Charmer showed up. It's probably been too long, and we probably should have had you on here before now. But that's a combination of me not thinking you'd ever have any desire to do this show, and then also you are one of the busiest humans on the planet. Those are two things.
I'm fairly busy, but I also love and respect Flesh and Blood content creators, especially folks who show up every single week to put out a show, because I've done that. I know the demands of consistency. It's actually one of the hardest things you can do. And that means through every up and down you may personally have with Flesh and Blood, or even Flesh and Blood may be going through, you come to the table every week and you try and make a product that is exciting for your fans and that people want to listen to. And doing that for 3 years straight is an achievement that should be celebrated. It is not easy. Everyone looks at this like, I know, because before I did it, I looked at it and I was like, this is easy. Anyone can do it. And then you do it and it's not easy. It's really hard. It asks a lot of you. So I appreciate y'all, and I am more than happy to sit down with you for a chat.
Awesome. Well, Derek just got back from locals, but he didn't tell me what locals he was just coming back from. So Derek, were you coming back from Flesh and Blood locals at least?
No, those are still sadly on Wednesday, which is of course the one night of the week I can't make it, but it's the same store that I'm happy to report that local store is now kind of popping off. So, I'd mentioned in the past that I had a new store and they were kind of trying to get Flesh and Blood up and running, and they're up to, I think today Rick said they have an average of 10 for their armories now, and they were, at least they're doing well enough that they have been awarded a RTN. So,
nice.
We were kind of talking about that. So I will be able to attend that, because that will not be a Wednesday. That'll be a weekend day. And I'm really looking forward to that. And there was some talk about maybe doing, some other things on other nights. Right now, they try to keep everything pretty inclusive. And this is across all of their games because it's a newer store. And so obviously they're trying to grow their player base just kind of in general. But for the folks that want to compete a little bit more, both for Flesh and Blood and games like Star Wars Unlimited, et cetera, there was talk about having like a competitive focus tonight where even if it's not like an official armory or an official, Star Wars night or whatever, people could show up and bring whatever constructed deck they want for their games with the intent of saying like, hey, I'm showing up and like this is tournament prep night in many ways, in part because there's some interest for prepping for the Flesh and Blood RTN, and then they didn't get it, but there's another local store that got awarded the only planetary qualifier for Star Wars in Michigan. And so with those two events going to be, coming up pretty close to each other, there's a pretty renewed focus on competitive play. And so they were kind of talking with me. They were like, hey, we know you can't make armories. What nights do work for you for doing something competitive? And I said, literally any night but Wednesday. Like, you guys put the armory on the only night that I'm swamped.
We record on Sundays, Derek.
Yeah.
Can you not do that on Sundays? Can you tell them that, hey, there are 2 nights to not put it on?
we record Sundays at 10 p.m. local time, my time. So we're already well done. So the biggest issue that I have, and the reason that I can't attend the Wednesday Armories, is because I record my other show with Doa. And I'm supposed to say, Doa says hi, Bryan. Doa is, time zone wise, 3 hours behind. And he also does stuff on Wednesday night. So like we have like this 3 hour window that we can record, and it just happens that it's at the exact same time that they scheduled our armories. So yeah.
I'm typing into the chat for the cast right now that we're recording Flesh and Pod right now with Bryan Gottlieb. Anyone want to say hi? We're going to see if anybody wants to say hello, Bryan.
No,
but
listen, Doa has like special privileges because he's cooler than me.
He gets to jump the hello line.
He's also cooler than me. So I guess there's that too. What I didn't hear you say, and it upsets me, is you didn't say that you had booked your ticket to Prague.
That is correct. I have not as of yet. I did start So MinMax does a really cool thing where if you go onto their website and you sign up for an account, you can potentially go through their buy
no
list.
Free ads.
Yeah. But you can go through their buy list and potentially sell a bunch of stuff. And I've got a large number of Flesh and Blood items that I'm, for whatever reason, just hanging on to that I don't really use. I basically only play Guardian and Assassin anymore, so I've started filling that out. My goal is tonight, maybe tomorrow at the latest, figuring out if I can sell enough stuff to book the flight. So
now you do know the world premiere is sold out, right? I hope I'm not the one breaking that news.
Yeah, no, you are. The last time I saw it was at like 90%. So
my ticket was purchased over a week ago.
Yeah.
So we're we might not be the thinnest and most attractive. Sometimes we are a little bit smart. So there is that. You're getting a lot of hellos here, Bryan. You got somebody says, tell Bryan he's a genius. Okay.
I'll take that.
A hello from DM Armada.
But,
whatever. A thank you for ROS. So a thank you for Rosetta. All right. Well, people love you. I guess you should probably accept that at this point that people love you.
I will happily accept that and extend my time.
Oh, yeah. I see it now. Sold out world premiere, 70% of tickets sold for the calling. This was late yesterday.
I would move on that calling too. I don't think that is long for this world either.
No,
if you're trying to just do, one event. And I do there's a lot of value to still attending the world premiere, even with the world premiere portion sold out. I think there'll be plenty of side events. You can certainly spend your entire weekend besides that event playing every hunted event you can imagine. But only so much capacity for these things. Like I try and warn people. All the advertising tries to warn people. It's like
Trevor does a good job of putting it out there. I
think these things are becoming a big highlight of the calendar, the Flesh and Blood calendar. And I think getting seats in them is going to be challenging. I certainly want everyone who wants to attend to be able to make these things, but there are very real logistical concerns around planning these events and booking space. So I don't think this is going to be the last time one of these sells out quite a bit in advance.
So let's jump into something I want to talk about because, and it's a positive thing, right? I don't know if you watched, but Peter from MinMax made a video, I believe, earlier this week or late last week.
Yep,
talking about the market. And he talked about the fact that his rare and common play sets that he makes a ton of. Again, hashtag no free ads. Fuck, Peter, just sponsor us already. But they're sold out. They have none of any set in stock right now. So to me, that says we are on a new player influx again. This would be the third, I believe, major player influx since I started playing in 2021. And I believe that a lot of that comes from Rosetta and heavy hitters being perfect jumping on points. And we'll get to those two sets here in a second. But I want to know, I don't know how much you see those numbers or see anything like that, but what are you hearing in that regard from there? Is it you're seeing the same thing in that events like this world premiere are selling out faster than anticipated? Is that something that you guys are tracking and then going, okay, maybe we need to go a little bigger?
I mean, we have lots of metrics we track. And I again, just want to be clear, this isn't my department. This all falls
Right.
under Trevor's purview, and he does a tremendous job setting this stuff up. And, he's always pushing the boundaries and seeing what more we can do, how much bigger we can go, how many more folks we can aim for under one roof. And he's going to keep doing that. There's a risk management element of it as well. Mm-hmm. You don't want to book a 4,000 person venue and 150 people show up. That's not a good move either.
Nope.
So he's got to balance all those things. But yeah, a lot of metrics we're seeing right now are just pointing towards very good, very sustainable growth. And maybe it's not, Monarch explosion level growth, which, to be frank, I'm not sure that's something that can be replicated anytime soon. Like, that's kind
coming
of a
straight out of the pandemic.
Form.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and also, like, people know about Flesh and Blood now. Like, there's, I doubt there's a Magic player on the face of the earth who hasn't at least heard of Flesh and Blood. But there was a moment, probably around that time, where Monarch was blowing up, where I heard about Flesh and Blood for the first time, and a lot of us heard about Flesh and Blood for the first time. And I don't think that's as likely at this point. It's more likely that we continue to put out good, exciting products, good, exciting tournament experiences, and a few more people go, okay, you know what? I resisted for a long time, but there's a lot of evidence building up that there is just something very cool going on here. I got to at least check it out. And I just think we see a good, steady influx of that type of player coming to the table. We reported on our Dev Talk podcast, we had most unique players for a month ever, and most individual tournament signups for a month ever. That goes back maybe a month, maybe 2 months ago, around the time of Rosetta release now. But yeah, we're seeing things like that regularly. And you can point to these premiere events. You can point to world premieres. You can point all over the Flesh and Blood World Tour. Just really nice, sustainable, good-looking growth metrics that are based upon, not flash in the pan hype type stuff, based upon just a well-built tournament scene, a well-built focus on getting new players on board, things like Armory decks doing their job very effectively, the Armory program just continuing to do its job very effectively. All those things are just going well right now.
Yeah, I say a lot on this show, a number of different, I say a lot of fucking things on this show, but one of the things I say often is that Flesh and Blood's pro scene, like the actual competitive play scene, is basically patterned off of Magic in 2014. And that's not an insult. That is a compliment. And what I neglect to say sometimes, and I need to be better about, is that they're doing it with better product. And what I mean in that regard is things like Armory decks. I think, and I've said this before, I think the Armory decks are genius. Just flat out the smartest product that you guys have ever released, because we get people that walk in to our locals and will watch the people that are sitting down playing before Armory and go, hey, how do I get into this game? You can walk in there right now, buy a deck off of the rack for $40 or whatever it is. Yeah, for $39.99. I have one sitting in front of me that's actually still has a sticker on it. And you can shuffle it up, sleeve it, shuffle it up, and play, and you have a real deck. It's not perfect. It's not a competitive deck, but it's a real deck. And you will learn the game from that. And people just do it. And it's incredible. I can't remember a product like that in any other game that accomplished that so easily.
Yeah, they're working really well. And frankly, despite as well as they're working, that's still a very young, and I would say not yet fully developed product line for us. So we're looking at ways to make them work better. And I think we can make them work better. And I think you'll see more of that, over the coming year. And we're not anywhere near done with Armory decks. We see them as a critical part of the game going forward. There's going to be a lot more Armory decks in the years to come. It wasn't something like, we need to get, 4 or 5 of these on the shelf and then they exist and we can be good. No, they're like a core part of what we do with Flesh and Blood now. And like any core part of Flesh and Blood, we're going to continually strive to make them better. And I think you'll see some of that in the coming year.
Yeah, perfect. We're already off the rails because I didn't have any of that in the show notes. So, but that's normal for us. We don't actually pay any attention to the things I write down. It doesn't actually matter. But we're normally at this point in time, we'd be talking about calling results. But here's the thing, folks. We are recording this while the calling is still going on in Portland. So,
on my other monitor, in fact.
Yeah, I'm also watching it. It turns out that time zones are a motherfucker. And we are suffering from that currently. So hopefully this will be done and we'll be able to report your winner before the event ends and have a little bit of a conversation around the hero spread and what we think here with Bryan, who may just tell us to shut up, which is fine too. But the currently we're on Michael Fong on Enigma versus Victor Mercado on CYB New. So this may take a minute. Just going to put that out there. But let's kind of go talk about something else. Now, I don't want to stroke your ego too hard, Bryan. I'm pretty sure you know exactly how good you have, the good things you've done for this game and how much you've meant to Flesh and Blood so far because you've been critical. And we've talked ad nauseum about the sets that have come out in the last effectively 2 years and had very few negative things to say in general, because we're both limited heads for one thing. And the limited has been better than it had been prior outside of WTR, the limited has been stellar in my mind. You're crushing it. But I want to talk a little bit about the Hunted, because this, and I know I don't want spoilers. I just throwing that out there, folks. If you're listening for spoilers, go somewhere else, because I am not going to do that. However, I do want to talk about this set specifically because this already, with very little revealed, feels very different than anything else you've done. I don't know if that's how it feels internally, but that's what the optics are from our side of the ball.
Do you expect me to confirm or deny that? That feels spoilerish. I don't know.
That is not spoilerish. That's just, you can confirm or deny whether I can actually read cards effectively and understand a mechanic.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of elements that are very unlike anything we've done before. We've also taken some good learnings from the past and applied them, which is kind of the mix every single time you go into one of these development cycles. But it's been really interesting to see how excited people are for maybe the broader framing of the Hunted. And I have to be honest, like, I don't think that this was captured on camera, but I knew I knew it was coming in the keynote speech. And I knew we were getting to the point of the Arachne reveal. And I went like this. Like, I literally couldn't look because I just didn't, like, I really thought there was a possibility people would just start booing and like throwing tomatoes at the stage. Like, I just didn't know what would happen. And like, obviously I'm a huge Assassin fan, a huge Arachne fan. But look, Arachne doesn't have like the most glamorous history in Flesh and Blood, short of introducing the Assassin class. That's kind of been it. But they're this really cool hero with a really cool story to tell. And I just didn't really know if the Flesh and Blood player base was going to be excited to hear that story. But it really seems like people are. They have a lot of love for, obviously the Draconic heroes are a huge part of it. But I just think the Emperor assassination thing is compelling. It's like a little bit of a mystery. I think there's lots of elements of mystery. Like, we know Arachne did it. It's a very simplistic statement, though. And obviously there is more than meets the eye when it comes to Arachne.
Yeah, Solana's assholes. I get it.
Yeah, I think people are just like excited to unpack what's going on here. And that's cool. That's cool to see them buy in to this fantasy. And I also revealed this in our post-keynote Q&A, because I knew nobody would ever believe the fact that James was the one who put Arachne into the set. It was not me. The initial concepting was a lot more about mechanical overlaps. And I was exploring a lot just this dagger overlap, which was the thing that really got the ball rolling here. And then we started thinking about class distribution and how that works. And he just at some point perked up and he was like, this could be Arachne. And then at some point, which we'll learn more about in the future, we realized this could be a lot of Arachnes. This could be piles of Arachnes. And it all came from him seeing that story thread reflected here. And it was not actually a mission of mine to insert all the Arachnes into the set. So if nothing else, it's nice to know that James also has that same affinity for this hero and that story that we started telling with the release of Dynasty. And it's cool to come back to it all these years later.
Yeah, I believe about 40% of that. But you're in the right podcast right now because you have the world's biggest Arachne fan in Derek. And then this is Arachne right here. I guess I can't do fingers great, but
my Arachne is over on that wall over
there. Right. And this switches out on occasion, but it's I'm a giant Eswardi Theriento fan who, and I don't mean that as an artist. I mean, also as an artist. I mean, obviously, I love him as an artist, but he's also just one of the best people I've ever met in my life. And just hanging out with Ijur is just the best. So anytime you can spend it with Ijur, you should take it. Just blanket statement. And he had a lot of the input originally in Arachne, as he did a lot of the early Arachne art and stuff like that. So you're in the right spot, turns out, because we also love Arachne for our own reasons. But when we're, so we finally got the text on Syndra and Fang. They were revealed in Portland hours ago at this point, but it'll be a couple of days for anybody listening. So we have Syndra, patron of Flesh and Pod, who, because she's literally it's Trakai of Retribution, but at this point in time, we're just running with it that you named it after one of our patrons. So typical 440 hero. Whenever you hit a marked hero, which I love that mechanic, by the way, create a fealty token. This is nuts to me because you can put together some crazy ass turns with once per turn instant, 3 red pips, equip up to 2 draconic daggers from your graveyard. This costs 1 less to activate for each draconic chain link you control. This shit costs 0. Like, this shit costs 0. Yeah, right. Putting the cost on there is pseudo irrelevant. I mean, it's relevant late game, obviously, but looking at it, I'm like, we flicking knives out here is what I just read. That's just the first thing that came to mind is we're flicking knives. Derek, I know this isn't your jam because it's not Arachne, but when you read this hero, what were your thoughts?
Flick knives came to mind, but so did some other cards like Hurl, for example. I'm kind of just excited in general, if I'm being honest, because I think that being on the hero text means that this is likely going to be relevant for limited as well, right? So I kind of look at this as a Chekhov's gun and say to myself, there's also got to be ways that you're getting rid of whatever your draconic daggers are within the set. Right? You're not going to have something on the hero that's just totally ignored for the entire limited portion. So whether or not that overlaps with assassin and I get more ways as an assassin to throw daggers, we'll have to wait and see. But I'm just excited to see it as a mechanic as a whole. Like, if I'm being entirely honest, one of the things that drew me into assassin thematically was the idea that you could play your daggers and then you could also throw them and get them back. And then you could also get your equipment back, right? Like that ebb and flow is different. It's interesting. We always talk about how, or at least I guess I should say I, not we, but on our podcast, we frequently talk about how this game is degenerative in its design, at its core, not to say that there aren't things that buck the trend, but for the most part, you start the game the strongest version of yourself, and then over time you wear down because of the wear and tear of battle, and that's really cool. But one of the ways that you can subvert that is by being able to get those resources back. Again, assassin, whether it's equipment with silver or things like, Concealed Blade, where you're getting a dagger back from your discard pile. Those are, to me, interesting areas of game design for this. And seeing other classes have the ability to do that is also always kind of exciting. I also personally, even though like I'm a huge Assassin fan and I still play a ton of Guardian because that was the class I first started playing heavily when I played the game, and I have no idea why. I have this weird love for Olympia. And one of the things that I thought about as well was like, okay, well, we're going to have a warrior, right? In the new set. And Olympia can also get stuff back, right, from the fridge. Curious to see if we're going to have ways to throw our weapons or do more that is just warrior daggers, or if it'll only be draconic daggers. We can likely expect some sort of sharing, I think, between the two based on the classes. So I don't know, just kind of thinking out loud, but I thought it'd be kind of neat if there was also new play styles that opened up for the warrior class and Olympia as well, based on, again, on this idea of, hey, your armaments can change throughout the course of the game. There's just a lot of really, this is my favorite thing about any card game ever is spoiler season, because as somebody who's just a huge fan of game design, as somebody who's a huge fan of thinking about the ways that flavor and function meet when you're doing game design, having an incomplete picture in my mind is a better way to stretch yourself mentally for the possibilities of game design, because again, you get these things that signal something. And so it doesn't matter whether it's in the set or not. It still, for me anyway, gets my brain thinking about all the different ways that something could occur within the bounds of the game, right? Or might occur in the future, even if it's not in this set. So moments like this are always big mental exercises for me, but like in the best of ways. Like I make it sound like homework, but it's not. It's really just passion and fun.
Yeah, let's bounce over. Like, let's use that really quick and just bounce over to Arachne again. Bryan, I don't know if you knew this, but you and the team over at LSS, I should give everybody credit here because the devs obviously are like, I love those guys so much. And the dev talks are so much fun. But y'all have maybe created one of the best conspiracy theories in the history of card games just by Arachne existing. And I don't know if that was a marketing tie-in or if you all just kind of said, in the spirit of everything that we do in Flesh and Pod, fuck it, we ball. And you just did the thing. But what you've done is created a hype cycle that I haven't seen in a very long time in any game. Because the speculation on Chaos and the speculation on Arachne and how this all works is rampant everywhere. And I don't want to talk about, okay, hold please. I do want to talk about those things, but I won't talk about those things out of respect because they are very compelling and I cannot wait for Prague. But because somebody was smart enough to buy tickets ahead of time. I don't know who that was. But the thing I do want to talk about was that the intent when you delivered Arachne slip through the cracks and kind of teased out the array of Arachnes? Was that this is going to make people talk?
Yep.
Best answer ever.
We have a really good marketing department. We have a really savvy marketing department. And I think beyond that, we have a marketing department that works really closely with our design team. And I spend a lot of time talking with that team, and we talk a lot about goals and how we envision the reveal of these things, because we kind of create both official and unofficial lore around these things. Like they take on very real identities before they even hit finished product stage. And our marketing team is so good at leaning into the way we envision these things and leaning into the mysteries we leave behind in our designs, and we are designing towards mysteries at times. Like, it is integral, particularly in this set. I think there was a lot of talk very early on about the mystery and, how exactly we're going to show all this stuff off and what we're going to hide and what we're going to share. And all those things I think they're just core to the product. Like, I don't think we view these things as separate elements of the product. We view them all as integral to the product, and bringing just that really cool, exciting, hyped up preview season means a lot to us. And I think that even, I'm talking about it from a design marketing collaboration standpoint, but that follows through to the OP side as well. And I think it's one of the cool things about LSS is that we have a lot of interdepartmental play and a lot of collaboration across departments. And so the OP team, particularly the Premier OP team, Trevor's team, is just on board with this element of mystery that we're going to bring all the way up to the world premiere. You're not going to know everything going into the world premiere. There's still going to be secrets. And our OP team embraces that. And it's just cool to have everyone on board with the same vision. And it does seem like it's working particularly well this go around.
It is. It very, very much so is. And I think that it's only gotten better over time. And that's to be expected as teams grow, as people work together, as a company evolves, as people evolve, as product evolves, you expect growth. But it's kind of unprecedented, the levels at which Flesh and Blood has grown sort of across the board in all ways. And so I want to talk a little bit about the design versus develop. I'm going to leave Fang on the back burner right now because I have some other takes about Fang, but I want to talk about, because you brought it up earlier, you're the lead developer and the senior game designer, correct? I got those right. Okay. Yep. Why the distinction in titles?
Yeah. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. It ultimately doesn't matter what my title is, right?
Sure. No, it doesn't at all.
I come into work and I do whatever I can to help put out a good Flesh and Blood set. And I don't really care where those things lie. But it does just denote, there's two lead developers. There's myself and Chris Gehring. And as you might expect from lead developers, we oversee the development process. And I've been trying to get this word out a little bit more, maybe in parts for self-preservation, maybe just because I feel like a lot of people deserve way more credit than they are getting. For instance, I come on this show and you tell me about all the great things I've done. And then there's people in chat saying I'm a genius. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, just work with a great team. Seriously, that is all this comes down to. And so part of my job as a lead developer is to facilitate that team, to support that team's conclusions, to help set up effective frameworks for reaching conclusions, to, in times when a final decision has to be made. Yeah, it falls on Chris and I to make those decisions, but it's always done with full input from the team, full backup from the team, and as much analytical brain power as we can bring to the task. And that almost all comes from that very, very talented development team, including our two senior developers, Rohan and Jason, who, they lead the day-to-day of that team. And while I may have my fingers in it, it is them who are in the trenches, grinding out the games, understanding the scenarios, bringing me full breakdowns of how these things work, what we need to be aware of, the type of final decisions we need to be thinking about as we come down the stretch. They deserve so much credit for that. And I'm kind of like a manager. That's a better way to think about it. I am put in a position to help them reach their full potential. And I love doing that. It's an incredible part of my job. On the design side, there's a very big distinction between me being a lead developer, where, like I said, I will be asked to make those final calls, and a senior game designer. there's one lead game designer for Flesh and Blood. There's been one lead game designer for Flesh and Blood since its inception. That has never changed. I don't think it ever will change, frankly. It is James White who brought this vision to the table, who still designs the vast, vast majority of the cards. I've seen, again, like this is where it kind of straddles the line between credit and self-preservation. I've seen people who are unhappy with the current state of Flesh and Blood. I saw a really wild conspiracy theory the other day that surmised because I was responsible for the worst and most powerful, egregious Magic design. Obviously, when I came over to Flesh and Blood, I would do the same thing here. Let's just ignore the fact that I literally worked for 4 weeks on Magic in my entire life in a consulting role at the very, very end of a development pipeline when the set was already finished. And I gave one feedback document, all of which was ignored for the most part. But like, that's the narrative that was shaped around my particular experience with Magic. And obviously I would do the same thing with Flesh and Blood. It's the same guy who's making the game.
Right.
It's his vision, and it's my job to support that vision. And a lot of the design work I do is filling in holes. We get these sets at, varying levels of completion. It really depends on the particular set. Rosetta came with a few more holes than a typical set. Something like Future Name Redacted came with almost no holes and just a fully, completely developed set. And my design work involves patching those holes where I can, but even that is not singular. And a lot of folks who are not credited as designers, folks like Chris Gehring, who at times certainly has out-designed my inputs on a set. I would say in general, it works at about 50-50 of the two of us filling those design holes, but there's plenty of sets where he designed way more stuff than I did. We patch those holes and we try and do so effectively. And we always do so with James's guidance and his final say on what the design is going to be of these things. So I've now not answered your question at all, but I've given a lot more context, which should help get to the answer of this question. The design development split is design brings these cards to the table, and then development makes sure they are safe, fun, appropriately balanced, have enough space to grow into in the future, or appropriately restricted in their influence over the future of Flesh and Blood, depending on what the priority might be. And you do your best to put together a well-balanced, focused, exciting Flesh and Blood set. And you have to do so while fulfilling the needs of a million different people who want a million different things. It's a humbling job. It's always humbling. You work really hard on it, and something you didn't intend always goes a little bit wrong. And it's just the nature. Like, I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. Mm-hmm. I've been working on Flesh and Blood, and I have learned a tremendous amount in that time. And I've also started to accept kind of the things I can and can't control. And one thing that I no longer have goals around is creating the perfect Flesh and Blood set. It's not possible. Like, there's just always going to be little rough edges, little mistakes. And you have to live with that, at the same time striving for the best possible set you can put out. And that's how I approach each pipeline now.
So a couple of quick things here. One, we are a community of Flesh and Pod listeners. They call themselves Fappers, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know.
That's a questionable name, but good for them. Whatever they want to, call
I'm not Yuck and Yums. They had named themselves that for 3 years at this point.
When I came on, I literally said, hey, maybe it's a good time for us to change this because, we're going through a change. And I was told emphatically no, and not by Logan, by the people in the Discord. They all said no. So
you got to give the people what they want.
Exactly.
I say that all the time. You got to give the people what they want. The other fun fact is that our community is full of agile devs, product owners, and scrum masters. So everything you just said just like fell directly in line with everybody fucking listening to this show right now.
Yeah,
Which
and the people who
was
aren't
awesome.
those are still like major either project managers or.
But they're doing waterfall bullshit, so we don't ever consider them for anything. But
No, listen, Clark will always have a special place in
Clark
my
is
heart.
agile. Clark is agile.
Physically.
No, physically he's in great shape. I don't know if have you ever met Clark Jansen?
Of course he's met Clark.
I feel like I have several times.
He's a great human, and really
I can't remember the specific time though that we met. Clark, please remind me where we met. I'm fairly confident we have several times, but I just can't remember the specific events where we met.
Okay. So a little bit of what we talked about pre-show is starting to come into fruition. We have New sitting at 5 right now to Michael Fung on Miragai was in play. Enigma at 24. Looked like the Miragai attacked twice, which is usually game over. And now we're just shoving a Miraging Metamorph that just decided, and Victor's response was place 2 CYBs and not die. So we're gaming over here, and that's fun too. But let's dial this into a different question. Now, I want to preface this a little bit because credit to where it's due. Derek went on a siesta in Italy. It was not his best time. However, I had to fill in with a guest host while Derek was away because me doing this on my own would be an absolute disaster. There is no way I can single pilot a show without getting us all fired. And I'm the one doing the firing. So I brought in DM Armada and Doa were my 2 guest hosts. So 2 elite guest hosts, not going to mince words there at all. But Steven said something and asked something that has stuck with me. And I've talked about it with every guest since, including Doa. The thing he said to me was we were talking and he just interrupted me. Came out of nowhere. He said, why? And I lost my train of thought immediately because it's that single word is a philosophical quandary for everybody. The why, right? And I stopped. I'm like, okay, why what? Why TCGs? Why do you invest your time, your energy, your attention, your money on these cardboard squares? What is it that drives you to TCGs? So, Bryan, I am going to posit this question to you. What drives you to TCGs?
I'm really upset.
Fuck off. I haven't asked you yet, but I will.
Right. I was like, wait. You never revisited this with me. I love this question.
We have infinite time for you and me. We don't have infinite time for Bryan and us. But the questions are why TCGs? And considering your background, because again, you didn't remember that we had met before. And I don't blame you. I'm thankful that you don't remember. But the other question behind why TCGs is why Flesh and Blood. But start with why TCGs.
So it's funny. I was on with Bryce Platts from AG a few weeks ago, and he asked this question. He asked it to me twice, actually, which I thought was very appropriate because the reality is I can answer something different every time. And I'm not lying to you. Like, it's not because there's just a billion reasons why I could say why TCGs. But I also think there's an element of it that is just like, it was not an active choice for me. I found this thing by chance. And my introduction story is interesting. I had a aunt who was very into like Renaissance fairs and just general early 90s geekery before the internet had fully rooted itself in those type of spaces. And by broad chance, she had like come through to visit at my parents' house carrying a deck of Magic cards with her. I asked what it was. She's like, oh, it's very complicated. You're you're not going to learn it. And of course, at that point, I'm like, I need to fucking learn this thing because when you tell me it's too complicated, like that's the thing I want to learn.
I'm the same type. I get that.
But I didn't immediately have an opportunity. And what happened next was a magazine came out. It was called Flux Magazine. I've never met someone with the same experience as me and like actually finding the game this way. I have since found the article. It took me a very long time to actually track it down. But it was an article in Flux Magazine, which was like a Wizard-like, if you read Wizard back in the day. But it was just about
off-brand Wizard. Yep.
Yeah. It was about comics, video games, etc. And in it, they had an article about Magic the Gathering, and it like tried to surmise the rules, did so very poorly. Listed like the top 10 best rares you could have and the top 10 best commons you could have. And it was like 3 pages, and it was enough to be like, oh my God, I need this immediately. And I grew up in a very, very small town, more cows than people, 1 traffic light, in the woods on top of a hill. And certainly in my very, very small town, nowhere was selling
together?
Magic. Possibly. It's possible.
I don't remember that. But okay.
I forget people all the time, so it wouldn't shock me.
Fuck off. So you forget Derek. Okay, I get it. Okay, we're good.
Yeah. But
everybody
forgets. There's no Magic cards in this space. I didn't even know where to get them. But at some point it clicked in my head, oh, that was what my aunt had. That was definitely the thing. I'm almost sure. And I made my parents call her, and like I wasn't super close with her and they weren't super close with her, but like I was just like, please, I need to know about this thing. And they contacted her and she's like, yes, that's what it was. And I said, is there any way you can help me get some cards, send them to me, whatever? She said, yeah, I'll send you, a bunch of cards. And she did. And she changed my life by doing so. And she's since passed away. And it's sad because I never got the chance to tell her how much she changed my life. Like maybe like 3 to 4 years after this is when she passed away. And like I said, we weren't super close. So I just didn't get to share it with her while she was still alive, which is a real shame in retrospect. But these cards arrived via U.S. Postal Service to my door and actually to my P.O. box. They didn't do mail delivery at my house because it was too rural, not what they do there. But they arrived and like that was it. It was just it. Like it wasn't a decision. It was just like, this is what I'm going to do. I will learn everything about this. I love this. This speaks to me. If you want to get into why, it's like the customizability, the art was a huge percentage of it. The experience of collecting, like I do just generally like collecting things. I like having cool collections and looking at them and seeing pride for the things I've gathered. That stuff all ticks boxes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
that's Derek's actually. Mine are graded, but
smart. Yeah, get that grading upside. But yeah, it just like wasn't even a choice. It was just once I found this thing, it was going to be the thing that dictated a lot of my life from that point.
Yeah, that's wild because I mean, I'm going to share something I've never actually shared on the show, which is crazy to me because I think I've shared everything on the show. But when because I lived in a same thing. It's a bigger town than Europe, grew up in, but God, not by much. And I grew up thinking that I had to fight for popularity. I had to fight. Michael Fung, by the way, on Enigma is the winner of the Calling Portland. Michael Hamilton there to congratulate him on video. What a wonderful scene. We have a world champion alongside a Pro Tour champion and now a calling champion in Michael Fung. Best call I had because I'm not listening to Sam's call, which is probably infinitely better than mine because Sam O'Byrne is a hyper intelligent and hyper talented individual and I can't ever compete. But back to what I was saying is I grew up in a very small town in Iowa. And it was... the only things you could do in this town were be an athlete or be a nobody. And I've always been a big dude. Never in my life have I been small. So football came easy and I've always been coordinated. For whatever reason, I've always been coordinated. So baseball came easy. What didn't come easy is when I suffered a knee injury when I was 12 years old. And eventually I was told that I couldn't play any sport ever again. So now I had to find a different path. And that path led me to this group of people who I never thought I would associate with, who a lot of them are now dear friends and lifetime friends almost 30 years later at this point. And in that space were people who embrace things like fantasy, anime, sci-fi, etc. And these are things I enjoyed, oddly enough, with my mother. My mom was a giant sci-fi person. My mom's also been on FAP After Dark. So if anybody decides to join that show, you might get my mom at some point. But what happened was they introduced me to different worlds. They introduced me to anime. Okay, not my jam for the most part, but some of it's fun. They introduced me to punk rock. That has now been a part of my life since. I have never shied away. I absolutely love the punk scene and the people in it. And that is my community, right? That's one of my communities. But they also introduced me to TCGs, and almost simultaneously, I was introduced to Star Wars CCG, the original Decipher version, and Magic. I gravitated towards Star Wars because of its complexity. Magic was too easy. I won way more than I lost in Magic early on, and that did not appeal to me. I got my ass beat on a regular basis in Star Wars, and that did appeal to me. So I focused there. But when Star Wars died, I had nowhere to go. The only other thing I knew was Magic, and so I went there. And as I hopped communities, I was always looking for that place that made me feel the same way as those people in a 6,000 Algona, Iowa, 6,000 people in northern Iowa made me feel. And I didn't find it until 2021, when I am almost 41 years old and I show up at a WTR draft. And the community embraces me and shows me that the good still exists. Those pieces that made you feel that way all those years ago, almost exactly 25 years ago, are still there. And all you have to do is let them back in. A few months later, I started this thing. This stupid ass show was born out of a conversation in a brewery, Rhinestag. I can't remember. It's in Cincy. It's very good. And since then, this has been my people. This community has meant more to me than virtually anything in my life. My family is basically my family, and like the friends I have that became very close to me over the time through Magic. My two best friends I met through Magic. They are above reproach in this regard. But this community and the friends I made through it have meant more to me than anything else outside of my family and a few friends in the past 3 years. Which is why every fucking week I have stepped up to this microphone and I have spoken to them. Because every now and again, I just get that message. Hey, man, I had a really rough going the last few months, but knowing that you were there every Tuesday morning, it has helped me get through it. It gave me something to look forward to. At that point, I can't stop. I'm here. I'm here for them. And they're here for me. And it's the most important part of any of this. That's what has me on TCGs. That's what Flesh and Blood means to me. And that's why I'm here.
Special thing, man. It's a unique thing. And I think I hope we all find something like that in our lives. And it takes a lot of different forms for different people. but it's hard to imagine existing without it, right? Like it's just so critical.
Almost impossible.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hearing the fact that, you had kind of a lot of that same experience, it seems. It was somebody gave you the keys to the kingdom, and all you had to do was turn the lock, and you chose to do it. And here you are.
Yeah, it's really funny for me. It happened on a delay, though, right? Like I get exposed to this.
Yeah.
And I kept it just like my thing. I didn't share it with my high school friends. It wasn't something I made friendships through. At that point, I was still playing sports, and all my friendships were through football and honestly through partying mostly.
Were you a safety? You look like a safety.
No, I was a D tackle.
You got to be fist fucking me. Okay, move past that.
First of all, when I graduated high school, I was 315 pounds.
No shit.
So I had some bulk behind me. I also bench pressed like 375 in high school. So
yeah, 330, 350 was about what I benched. But yeah,
very strong. I was a good D tackle. I was an all-star D tackle. But now I think if you pushed against me lightly, I would shatter into a million pieces. So things change as you get older, it turns out.
It's true.
But yeah, for whatever reason, like it wasn't a side of myself that I was comfortable like making who I was early on in my life. And it took time until I did end up I needed something to get me out of the spaces I was in, because the spaces I was in were just drinking and partying, and it's all good. I'm not hating on anyone who wants to do that with their life. I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of incredible experiences, but I didn't want it to be my forever thing. I wanted something more stable, more, I don't know. Like, it's funny that it was less socially acceptable when I was younger to be a Magic player. And as I got older, it felt like it became way more socially acceptable to be a TCG player rather than to be the person I was being prior to fully embracing that lifestyle. So just an interesting shift in dynamics. But yeah, I mean, it is so important for everyone to have that in their lives. And the fact that I get to be a part of providing that for people. It's why going to things like the World Championships in Osaka, going to Calling Chicago in a few weeks, going to Prague in January, it's really hard on my schedule. The travel demands, considering I already have to travel to New Zealand a lot of the time, it's super demanding. But I can't give it up. Like, it feels like the tie to the realness of all of this, the importance of all this. And if I were to just walk away from that aspect of it, it would be too siloed. It would be too isolating, and it would be too easy to lose sight of like why I want to work so hard to make those kind of spaces and those kind of environments. So yeah, it's so funny. Like, all of these type of experiences just keep looping back around to the core of why I care so much about Flesh and Blood, why I care so much about the type of products we deliver, why I want this to be a great thing, because I don't want this to end ever for anyone. I want you to be able to do this for as long as you want to do this. It's so important to me to keep providing those experiences. So when I don't sleep much, that's my justification. And it does feel worth it if I am present and with the community.
I couldn't agree more. And I 100% look forward to seeing you in Chicago, and Prague for that matter, because
it'll be fun.
Yeah, it'll be a good time, and we probably should catch a drink or something at some point in time during that time. What the fuck is wrong? Never mind. I don't want to know what's wrong with you, because we only have another 30 minutes of Brian's time, so I don't want to waste it on you talking about what's wrong with you.
Brian being at any event and feeling capable of doing anything. Like, poor man runs himself ragged every time I've ever ran into him at an event.
Very true.
I feel so bad.
It's so great to see you. Now don't ask me to talk.
I feel so bad every time. Like, there's a million people I want to hang out with. And it was especially pointed in Osaka. There's so many people that I just wanted to be able to spend some time with, and I just didn't have the time. And
do you know how goated Joe Sapp is? But anyway,
great dude.
he is. We have some listener questions. I want to make sure I get into some of them. I know we're going to run up against it here pretty quick, but this is one thing that was very important to me personally, because if people don't know, and they might not, honestly, because it's weird how small the Magic overlap with the Flesh and Blood community can be at times. But you were a podcaster for a number of years in the Magic side of things. If you want to listen to Bryan's archives, it's the Arena Decklist podcast, and I think now called the Jerry Thompson podcast or Jerry T podcast, one of the two. And this is something that's important to me because obviously we have our lane. We're not moving from it because we have our lane. But the question is, what do you think is missing in Flesh and Blood content?
Flesh and Blood content is really good. Like
It's
really
really good.
good. There's so many talented creators. And every time I feel like something's missing, a new creator pops up. I just watched Liv. I think her YouTube handle is Liv and T.
Yep.
TCGs.
Yep.
I just watched her gift guide last night.
Incredible.
And I'm like, this is so good. It's so, like the delivery is so good. It's a type of content that like didn't really feel like it was present. And she just like showed up on my feed 3 to 4 months ago making these videos that were already incredible the first time she set out to do them. And I feel like somebody new like that shows up in Flesh and Blood spaces every week. I have previously sort of begrudged the lack of long-form written content, in part because that's something I did for a long time. And I really appreciated what having a stable of employed, well-paid writers to, on a weekly basis, engage with long-form pieces about the game did for the game of Magic for years and years, both from a
Star City
ecosystem standpoint.
Yep.
Star City
TCG and Star City. Yep. They were great.
They financed a lot of folks really making a career out of TCGs.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was very, very important in a way that gave them a lot more certainty and a lot more agency than something like YouTube payouts.
That's true.
It just was a very different world. And beyond that, I do think it forced engagement with formats that was a little bit more nuanced, a little bit more in depth, and often did a good job of somewhat inorganically, but still organically cycling formats and moving things forward. So I miss that. I think I am very real that there may not be space for that in the present world, like just from number of people who actually want that type standpoint, from a viability of economic model standpoint. Like there's a bunch of reasons why that runs into some big hurdles. So I wish it was there, but I understand entirely why it's not.
Yeah, there was, I'm going to give up some props really quick to somebody who made an impact on me, and she'll never know it because she would never know. But her name was Kristen Nanavignali, and she was a college professor who broke down the hierarchy really easily when it comes to communicating through a medium, which was we watch more than we listen. We listen more than we write. We might write more than we read. We read very little. And some of that has a profound impact on the way that content is handled in any space, right? And in the Magic space, you had so many uber talented writers that were occupying enough time with enough, I don't want to say clickbait because it wasn't exactly that, because their content was good. I'm talking about your Sam Blacks of the world. I'm talking about your Seth Manfields. I'm talking about your Cedrics, right? Cedric Phillips is an incredible writer. He's not dead, but the fact is that these people, Charmer's dying. The fact is that these people were all incredible writers and engaging and knew how to go through high level, low level stuff that's in their weeds, and then pop it up to a high level and then bring it back down and keep going. And we are missing that, but we're also missing platforms. Not to throw any shade to the mothership. I think the mothership for FaBTCG is great, but it's that secondary thing. Like Magic had Star City, Magic had TCG Player. We don't have those yet. We don't have those article repositories where you can invite people who are talented writers that can engage readers to come in and do that long form content that you're talking about.
See, I think this is the problem, though, because we do. Like, there are spots that absolutely do that. And there's really good long form writers out there. And that's why I almost feel bad about making that complaint, is because I think they do exist. It's just not part of like the discourse and the way that all of this discussion works anymore. It all is focused here. It's focused on podcasts, it's focused on video platforms. And the fact that these people are doing great work, and it doesn't feel like it quite breaks in to the community's perception of Fab, I think that's where it's really failing. Not so much that there aren't great people doing great things, just it's not taking on the relevance, the importance it should be in these spaces.
I agree with you in every possible way. The problem I have is that it doesn't feel like there are platforms for it. I think what we're missing
a singular space where these exist.
Correct. Exactly. Yeah. I think we have insanely talented individuals in here. I look at what, Tyler Luce does. I look at what Marina's been doing. And I look at, if you go read Mara Ferris's Patreon, and hashtag no free ads. I swear to God, Mara, if you get fucking Patreon money for this, you better be shipping it. But if you look at Mara's Patreon and the guides that she puts together for everything she does, and to a lesser extent, Dagan White. But if you look at these things, they are incredible pieces that belong on a wide platform, but there isn't a platform. And I feel like this is the opportunity for somebody like a MinMax would be a good example. Or for Hamal Patel to just say, fuck it, we ball, and just expand the bazaar. And because he's been an incredible player in getting cards to people. I don't want to call Hamal a vendor, because what he does is more important, because what Hamal does is provide cards to masses at reasonable prices at all points in time. Again, hashtag no free ads. Hamal, I swear to Christ, if you get more business from this, you should be paying me. But the point is, these are things that can be solved pretty easily by existing entities. And both on the writing side, I mean, I'd love to write 20 hours a week in addition to doing this. I really would. But I also know that there are people who are better at this than I am. And the platform for them isn't there, so they're resorting to Patreons. And we have a Patreon, no slight to that platform either. But we could be housing this in a more communal and accessible space, and we're not doing it. My question to you is, do you feel like we are missing the boat there, and what can we do to fix that?
No, I don't think so. I just don't think that works anymore. That's the biggest problem. Like, if MinMax or Hamel decided to do that, they're doing it at a loss. They're not going to make money from doing so. They're not going to bring in clicks. And frankly, it became true of SCG towards the end of their run, where it was just not financially sustainable. Now, they were paying us well. Like, I will say that.
I wasn't calling you out, but
maybe they were paying us too well.
I read your articles. I wasn't calling you out.
Certainly by the standards of what you would get today for such an article, it feels almost ridiculous. And that's not accounting for inflation, what they were paying us. And, I have a very safe way to reference this by virtue of my good friend, Jerry Thompson, who just wrote an article saying he was being paid $1,200 per article by SCG. and put that out there for everyone to both use to inform their own payment demands, and also just talk about why he felt that he was worth that much money. And he was.
Yeah,
He was
no,
for a period
100%.
of time to them. That may not have been true towards the end of SCG's run, but I don't think that had anything to do with him. His value hadn't changed. The value of providing that kind of service to people had changed. But you can't do that now. Like you will not make money paying that way. The subscribers for a premium model are not there. And I don't fault anyone for not engaging with business models that do not work in the present day. The world has changed. The world will always change. So I may be sad about it, but I don't think it's a failure. I just think it's reality.
I'm glad you put it that way, because that was 100% Socratic. But you're right. Like, that's the best thing I have to say, is that you're correct. I remember when, again, somebody that I don't expect the Fab community to necessarily know, but Wyatt Darby is somebody I've known for a long time. He's an Iowan. I've been playing with him forever. And he even at one point said, like, hey, can I come and spike one of these Flesh and Blood tournaments? And I just looked at him and said, no, you will be eaten alive. And he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and went, oh, I shouldn't even try. I'm like, no, you should try, but you're going to get blasted. I think he went to like one armory and got rolled. But the fact of the matter is that you're right. This type of content, that type of content, I should say, is no longer viable in certain ways. And a lot of it is due to, I'm sure that Jerry was putting in, for his $1,200 article, that was probably 40, 50 hours of work to research, everything nettled down, to edit, to do all of the work that went into it. And no, like, hard pass. As somebody that works in corporate America, they pay better than that. And while I'm not necessarily happy doing that, hopefully my employers aren't listening, I also understand the value of an hour of my time. I get it. I don't do this to make money. I never have. I do this for two reasons. One, I enjoy it. I like Charmer telling me I'm an idiot. The other end is it makes somebody else's day a little bit better. That's it. That's all it takes. One person. If I make one person's day better, my time just became worth it. Cool. Moving on. But for people that are trying to make a career of it, I think you're 100% right. The model of writing articles doesn't really work. If it did, the mothership would have more articles. Min-Max would invest in articles. But that isn't it.
Well, I think that one of the key pieces of the puzzle, and why I agreed so vehemently with Bryan, even though it was silently for our audio listeners, times are just different. So, when you think about like the early days of the internet, and also just early days of trading card game culture, you weren't competing with Amazon for product, right? Like, you were still selling cards at local game stores. And so if game stores in the early days of the internet could write articles and draw people to them, then that was their advertising to also help pay for singles sales, right? But now if Min-Max pays somebody to write an article, how many more people are they going to get because of that article, right? Like, it doesn't make financial sense for the person who's trying to create the centralized location. And so, like all things related to, let's be honest, like hobby success, it's a bit of like right place, right time. Like Star City was able to do it because they had the right model at the right time in history. But if somebody wants to try to do that again today, they just can't, because they're competing with a global economy, and they're competing with content creators that can self-publish across a number of different apps that feed not just your PC, but right to people's pockets. So it doesn't benefit somebody to centralize it. And so that's why you're kind of losing that communal feeling, I think, Logan. But I just agree with Bryan. It just doesn't work right now. I don't think we'll ever get that again. That was a product of its time.
Do you know the closest when SCG like stopped doing its stuff? Obviously, Jerry and I were still doing the podcast at that point, and we were kind of like, what's next? And we had our website, which was doing okay. You know,
it does okay.
Was good. Our podcast was doing
great,
still very well at this point. The Patreon income was all good. But we were like, what do we do in terms of written articles? Do you know the thing that we were most excited about doing, the thing that actually felt most viable and most interesting? It's so far outside the realm of expectation. We were talking about doing a magazine, like an actual physical magazine.
Like
that's as close.
Mail to People magazine.
Yep. That's as close as we came to doing something beyond that. And that sounds absurd.
Yeah.
But the reality is that written content on the internet was not going to work. Like, we knew that was dead. We knew this market was niche. We knew it was real, but extremely niche. And what we actually needed to do was make something that people would pay a premium for and say, I care so deeply about this that I'm willing to invest in this. But nobody feels that way about a website. They do not feel like they want to give you $20 a month to be on your website and reading the same WordPress article that everyone puts out. So we started thinking, well, what if we actually did something almost retro in its feel? And we put together this beautiful, high quality magazine, and we went for the best authors, and we went for the most timeless things. And we, instead of trying to make it cheaper on our end to produce, we made it way more expensive on our end.
You increased your bottom line by so much.
But make something beautiful and worth owning. And that's as close as we came to kind of re-engaging with the product of written content in that post-SCG era. Again, ultimately, we didn't do it. There's a huge amount of problems, but like, I wasn't as excited about any other idea. I was not excited to launch, our content website where we went and got a bunch of the best writers. I wasn't excited to do a content website ourselves and just like look at it as a Patreon tie-on. There was just no upside there. So
I get it. I think it's a good question. I think it's something that people should ask themselves is, why am I doing the thing? And what is the value in the thing? And what you just explained is the reason that people should be asking those questions, honestly. And I know that Charmer was blackmailed into it roughly, but I got dirt on him. That's horrifying. But
smart.
We don't have a ton of time left, but let's get to a couple of listener questions because they want to talk to you. They definitely. I don't know
why, but
I think I know why. I think it's the whole lead developer, senior game designer portion of the show, but maybe I'm wrong. The first one's from Greg. I'm always going to respect Greg's questions because he edits the show sometimes and is also an integral part of FAP After Dark, which is also kind of off the fucking rails sometimes. Greg says, not Fab related. Do you more regularly have nightmares that you release a card that breaks flesh and blood, or that you're still a lawyer and they want to know why you're in New Zealand instead of the office?
The answer is neither. The answer is neither. My nightmares come about being either a bartender or a server again.
Jesus Christ, please.
Apparently, that was way more traumatic than being a big law lawyer or being a developer and designer of Flesh and Blood, because that's the thing that haunts my dreams, is just being like triple sat and having to run around and take orders.
So what you're trying to say is being an attorney is easy mode compared to being a server.
I honestly think there's aspects of that are true. I really do.
I saw, out of all of the professions I've been in, and I even worked for a local police department at one point, I can tell you I saw more guns in my time working for Denny's than I did any other job I've had.
Yep, I had guns pulled on me multiple times as a bartender. Yep, is what it is.
I remember reading the Todd Anderson article about being robbed at a Waffle House. And I went, that's fucking bullshit. And then not 3 months later, I'm in a Waffle House and a dude comes in to rob it. And he's, give me your money. And he's, not holding a gun, but is just screaming, give your money with something in his pocket. And he gets me. I'm like, no, absolutely not. He's like, I'll shoot you. I'm like, do it. And then he went to a different table.
That was my response too. And I'm not trying to paint myself as a tough guy. I had no idea.
I'm not a tough guy. I don't care.
That's what I would respond with in the moment. But what happened was the person was mad that I didn't make their drink strong enough and threatened to shoot me over. And I was just like, fuck, if I'm going to die this way, like, fine. I just don't care anymore. Like, let's go for it. And I was just like, go ahead. I don't care. I do not care.
Let's do it. Yep. The second Fab-related question was, what's your favorite generic card? Bonus points if it blocks 2.
I put Last Ditch Effort in too many decks. I always have. I don't know if it's my favorite card, but it just weasels its way in. Since I'm getting bonus points for cards that block for 2, I'll mention Erase Face because I just like the idea of a 2 for 6 that comes in and out of metagame relevance and has its moments and then disappears for a while. And I just think it's doing a good job showing how much depth there is in that 2 for 6 disruptive space.
Yeah. Quick aside, when there was a spot in the semifinals of a ProQuest where Dagon White was killing me with a last-ditch effort. And I just went ahead and just calmly and rationally pulled the last-ditch effort out of its outer sleeve, pulled it out of its inner sleeve, grabbed the marker that was sitting across from me and just signed it. And he's like, what the fuck, man? I'm like, listen, my signature is gas. This looks good. And also, anytime you kill somebody with a last-ditch effort, you should make them sign it. And then immediately died. So I 100% get that one.
That used to be my go-to in MTG, but it was with a Mindslaver.
Mine was Sarpadian Empire's Volume, whatever the fuck that was. The next one is from 7 Foot James. Bryan, how many times a week do people ask if you're related to Robert Downey Jr.?
Not as much anymore. I'm getting old and decrepit, so I don't often get compared to attractive celebrities, but I used to hear that a lot back in the day. The other one I used to hear when I was a younger, more handsome man was Enrique Iglesias. And I don't know if that's just if I spent a lot of time in the sun or whatever.
You were very tan at one point.
I was. Yeah, I was much tanner than I am presently. So those are the two I get quasi frequently.
All right. Speed running a little bit harder. Next one's from Poxonus, who is a valued member of the Patreon. Why won't you give Logan a card to preview, and why is it Charmer's fault?
See, this feels like it goes back to the not understanding what I do at LSS. I don't do the preview cards. I have no influence over this. And if it was just you, I'd just be like, oh, they're just telling a joke. Everyone asks me for preview cards. I have no control over this. I don't understand why you even think I have control.
This is actually my fault, which is why it's funny that it says, why is it Charmer's fault? This question is my fault because whenever anybody says anything about our show and general relevance with LSS in any official capacity, I always say very publicly it's because Bryan hates me. Now, I know that you don't hate me publicly, right? But privately, I know obviously you hate me. So this is my fault.
Holy fuck. You need to stop talking.
A lot of pressure on me. I don't understand why I'm subjected to this.
Did you know that Dalen Mack only recently within the last year figured out that bees make honey? Okay, moving on. At any rate, I know Dalen doesn't listen on a regular basis, so I'm going to get away with that one. But
he's going to be cranky. He went winless in Portland. I don't know if he's going to be in the mood for it.
And I hope he doesn't listen, because while we are the same size on paper, we're not the same. No. And I will die. But then Paxam Anas also follows up with, as a former Arena Decklist listener, it's been wild to see you evolve from your MTG days. What was the moment from that era that made you say, nah, fuck this, I'm out?
When I got offered the job with LSS.
No notes. Cross it off.
I was looking for an out for a very long time. And
no, I understand.
I said for a long time, my biggest regret is like not leaving Magic earlier because it had reached such a state where I was just very unhappy with it. And my thing, if I'm unhappy with something, is I leave. I always do that. But I was like, my financial dependence is kind of whatever. I'm willing to take larks and do something new. But I was also working with somebody who I absolutely was not comfortable hanging out to kind of dry. And I wanted to make sure things were stable enough and in a good enough place. And, you know, for a long time after I started working with LSS, I was still doing my podcast with Jerry. And only when it got to the point where I was just like, I can't anymore. I haven't looked at a Magic card in 2 months, and I'm actually harming you by continuing to be on this show. So, but as far as like wanting to get out, it was just when I stopped being happy with the game.
Yeah. It turns out that Jerry is very good at recognizing smart, engaging, and well-spoken individuals. And now Dave Shields does it with him instead. And it works out great.
He was never going to have a hard time finding a better replacement than me. And I knew that from the beginning, but I needed him to be comfortable with that idea before
I get it.
Leave him hanging.
I would not call Dave better than you.
Dave's a better Magic player than me. I'll say that.
Don't even know if I'd go that far.
I would.
But that's fair. You can. But I have 0 wins against you lifetime.
Okay.
I have non-zero against the remaining members of that podcast. The next one's a fun one because this is one that I actually enjoyed reading, and I'm like, okay, I'm into this. This is from Tiny Ten Hands. Question from everyone. What is your favorite meal you've ever had? Could be due to the quality of the meal itself or potentially a memory attached to it, or both are equally viable.
Does my wedding meal count?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. I don't remember anything about the food that we ate. I don't even know what it was. But yeah, I was very lucky to have just a fantastic wedding day with amazing people around, and obviously getting to marry my wife, whom now 11 plus years later, we are still very much in love and very happy together. So it's hard to fight against that as the best possible answer.
Take the W's when they come. Derek?
I had a great wedding meal. It was like catered in and Thanksgiving, but I'm not going to choose that. And I will instead choose for my 15th wedding anniversary, I surprised my wife with a trip to Iceland to renew our vows and do a bunch of stuff. And while we were there, I booked us a meal that you eat in the greenhouse. Like you physically sit in the greenhouse where they grow all of the food, and there's like flowers and bees buzzing around, and it was some of the best food I've ever had. Like they also come over and they talk about how they do it year round and all the things they do to grow food in the harsh climates of Iceland. It was just phenomenal though. They kept talking about how like everything that we get, like a lot of your food, the quality of the water makes its way through the quality of the rest of the meal. And obviously Iceland is like known for their absolutely stunningly fantastic glacial water. And it showed. So both for quality, but also for nostalgia / memory. I'll pick that one.
All right, both you motherfuckers are going to get me in trouble because mine does not involve my spouse.
Sucks to be you.
It was in Hyderabad, India, and the locals, I was there for work, and the locals did a really good job of kind of embracing me just because I would eat their food. It wasn't an anathema to me to just like say, is this spicy? Yes, bring it. Let's go. And they kind of just adopted me at that point. And they started bringing me lunches to work that were homemade daily for the 2 weeks I was there. Those were incredible. But the best one was when Samuel Badi said, you know what? You should go to Chagos. And I'm like, okay, can you spell that for me? Honest to God, Chagos is Shag House, but instead of being Shag House, it's Shah Gulls. It's amazing. Any rate, because that's not even remotely any derivative English. And I went there, and I was in Hyderabad, which is the home of biryani, which is spiced rice with meats. And the biryani at Shagos made me see God for the first time in my life and believe that deities were real. Because holy shit, was that transcendental. I almost decided to convert to Hinduism right there. And I probably would have if it weren't Ramadan. And outside, the sun went down and got Halim at the same time, which was also really good. But by a mile, I think that was the answer for me. Bryan, you got time for a couple more?
Yeah, let's go. We'll go super speed round.
Let's speed around this a little bit. So I'm going to go to Bryn really quick because she is smarter than I am. And also one of our FAP After Dark co-hosts. She says, are there any past synergies or combos that you think would have been great meta decks that competitive players didn't figure out?
We thought Hyperdriver -IO might have been the best deck in Bright Lights Limited. And I don't know that I ever saw anyone play it.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think I ever saw anybody play
Maybe
it.
we were
Holy
just
shit.
wrong. We might have just been wrong, honestly. But like,
was it Jason that determined that?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was we didn't know to IP ourselves. Is basically what you're telling me.
Maybe.
God
it was
I'm a
very
fucking
hard
idiot.
to beat internally.
The other one is do you think Fab signpost archetypes and synergies are too vague or too obvious? Is there discussion about hiding game plans deeper than they already are?
It just depends on the particular instance. I think it is good to have a mix of both. And sometimes you want things to be really obvious and signposted everywhere. And sometimes you want things to be a little bit more obscured. And I think we do a nice mix of the two. If anything, I think we could probably lean deeper into obscuring, but we've ran into some troubles with that before. And, again, give the people what they want, take your audience as you find them. And it does seem like the appetite for either this like slow build or the not immediately obvious what you're supposed to be doing with said hero. I think that appetite is smaller than the kind of like well signposted, well and fully crafted heroes. So yeah, I think we'll continue to see just experiences all over the spectrum as we go forward.
All right. Next one's from Clark J, the eponymous Clark J. We talked about him earlier. Bryan, thank you for continuing to engage with the community despite some unpleasant interactions you've had. We've all seen those if we followed you.
Yeah, to be fair, I just want to be clear. The vast majority of my interactions are so good. Like that's what, like the outliers are really stark because they're almost always universally positive. And I don't ever want anyone to lose sight of that for what it's worth. I think it's important that we just remind ourselves that huge percentage of this community is just not only looking out for each other, but has also looked out for me throughout my entire time here.
I just want to be clear that when I heard Stark, I heard Charmer's eldest child.
That's because my son torments you.
That little motherfucker. I swear to God, I'm going to drown him in a goddamn fountain someday. But back to this. What triggered the change in philosophy from relying on bad matchups to police certain decks to instead giving more tools to all classes? And what do you hope to achieve with this change?
Seeing the outcomes of being like, okay, new will please Zen. Just
that happened, by the way, literally an hour ago.
Like it is broadly true, but it doesn't fix the metagame in and of itself. And that's not enough to turn the metagame. And the reality is, in Magic, you could almost rely on something like that because people will abandon the thing that like starts getting targeted and starts getting hated out. There's too much tied into hero identity here. It's not as fluid as Magic. And some of the differences between our game and Magic have taken a little bit longer for me to fully unpack than I would like to admit. And I think that's just true whenever you're exploring the depth of a game system as good as Flesh and Blood. Like, you're going to learn more and more, and some of the assumptions you bring into it are going to be flawed. And you can police the format via this one bad matchup assumption. It was flawed. And we're moving away from that more and more.
All right. This one is actually something that is off your purview, and I understand that, but I want to ask it anyway because I love it. This is from El Dorte, who is trying to get Charmer to emigrate to Switzerland. Is there interest in a Fab roleplay system?
I mean, from me, yes. Do I want to build it? I don't think I have time for that.
I will build it. I will do this for you.
Look, I don't actually play role-playing games, but I read a lot of role-playing books. I read a ton of D&D books. I read a bunch of Pathfinder books. I read a bunch of obscure RPGs because I'm fascinated by rule system, and I also find them inspiring. And, I think a huge portion of what we do is to create a role-playing experience in the form of a TCG. And that's not to say it's going to be directly typical role-playing games, but we have to make you feel like you're a hero. That is our core goal. Every single time we have you sit down to play Flesh and Blood, you should feel like a representation of this hero that we've crafted. And role-playing does that beautifully. And I find constant inspiration from these books. And if there was a Fab one, I think that would be awesome.
Fair, because I have wanted to do Fab as a D&D like for a year plus, and I've stopped because of this show. I would love a Fab role-playing system. Just going to throw that out there. I'm going to do two more if that's okay with you. One's very easy. But the next one is from Popo Mike. I'm often surprised that LSS doesn't release new classes more frequently. It seems like an effective way to generate hype and boost sales for a new set. Is the challenge of designing, balancing, and supporting a new class daunting, or is there another reason for the infrequent releases?
I'm surprised you don't release more cocktails, Mike. Let's go. I want cocktails.
You know who he is. Basis. Perfect.
Come on. What are we waiting for? Yeah,
know,
it's
right?
hard, man. It's really hard to make new classes. You have to meet expectations. You have to deliver on this thing that in a lot of cases, the fan base has been feverishly waiting for. And you have to do so in a balanced way. You have to do so in a way that, fulfills the core fantasy of these classes. You have to think about how you're fitting them into sets and how they're going to go ahead and interact with now these fully developed classes that have had 5 years to kind of flesh out their card pool. There's a lot to it. And I think the introduction of a class is supposed to be a milestone moment in Flesh and Blood, not something that happens on a set-to-set basis. I do question some of the talks around hero bloat. I do think there's probably an upper limit. I don't think we're at it.
No.
But I wouldn't question somebody talking about class bloat. I think if classes got too wide, things get a little bit more dicey because you want to make sure all those classes are getting their, occasional moments in the sun, getting their occasional upgrades. And if that class roster gets way too wide, it's going to be harder and harder to do. So, there'll be more classes in the future of Flesh and Blood, but that's never intended to be like a regular thing and something happening all that often.
All right. Last one, Brian. It's a very important question. You just steel yourself and be ready. From Eugen. Would you rather fight 100 duck-sized arachnes or one arachne-sized duck?
One arachne-sized duck.
Yeah,
easily.
100%. This was the easiest thing I've ever seen in my life.
It doesn't matter what size an arachne is. That is not something I want to fight. They are absurdly murderous, bloodthirsty, capable of all types of horrible things. And I think they would be equally as capable in a duck size, especially if there's. I don't want to fight one duck size arachne.
No,
I would rather have the singular arachne size duck than one duck size arachne.
I couldn't agree more. We're going to do something that we haven't done yet. And this is it's a 3-year anniversary. We're going to thank everybody in order of when they subscribe to our Patreon that has ever subscribed to our Patreon. We're going to start with Michael, Allen, Corey, Jeffo, who still is to this day, Ben, Teague, Ricky Has No Life, which is a great name, Steven, Nick, Josh, Ed, Taylor, Philip, Alex, May, who has been crushing it in Magic lately, Andy, Dan, George, Vintox18, congratulations on 3 years. Thank you for being an active Patreon for as long as you have. Rich, same to you, Rich. Polish guy Rich has been one of our most ardent supporters for a very long time. Our heart goes out to Rich because he has kept this boat afloat in a lot of ways. Matt, Two Tokes. All right. Are you ready? You may want to mute because this is going to be a 3-year version of this, and it's going to be loud. Are you ready? Derek, are you ready?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Let's go. Let's go thrust. All right. That's as good as you're ever going to get, Lance. Syndra, who had her name way before the hero. Alex, Blaze Storm, valued member of the Patreon. Salty Sea Cat, Dom, Ejur, so his Wardy Theriento gives money to the show. That should tell you everything you need to know. Poxanus, Jacob, Donnie K, Quasar, Afi, Sergeant Swanson, Aladoris, David, Justin, Elaine Hammondtree of all people, because why not? Micaiah, and our newest patron, Charles. Thank you very much for all your support over the past 3 years. It's kept the lights on. It's kept the mics hot. I stole that from Tommy Fresh. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, want to thank you for all the support over this, journey. I threatened to stop doing this show at some point in time. I'm sure I meant none of it. And honestly, y'all mean the world to me. Thank you for all the questions you submitted. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them, but holy shit. Although, from Loose Leaf Tea, who's the best Dan to Dan character, Brian?
Momo, by a lot. She's such a badass. She's so different from typical anime protagonists. Huge Momo fan. Also, shout outs to Dan to Dan. I've been with my wife for 17 years now. I've watched anime for all 17 years of that. She has not given a shit about it. And in fact, just the countless incidents where I am watching something and you know how anime
I do.
doing it. Like and occasionally there'll be something on your screen that is very hard to justify. And she's walked in on plenty of those moments. And despite all of that, for whatever reason, she sat down to watch Dan to Dan with me. Fucking loves it. Then we sat down and watched all of Chainsaw Man. We're
Chainsaw Man's good.
Hunter now. Like she's just in. And after 17 years in one fucking month of Dan to Dan, she's like, "Yep, this is great. I'm an idiot. I should have been here the whole time."
One of my favorite early Fab memories was in a speakeasy in the middle of nowhere, Ohio. Back to our friend Dalen Mack. And he is getting his ass rolled by Dagged White over and over and over again. Is very angry about it. And eventually the conversation switches to One Piece. And he looks over it and says, "Nah, I watched all that shit." And I'm like, Dalen, you are a Division I athlete. There's no fucking way you have watched all of One Piece. He's like, "Nah, bro, I watched all 1,000+ episodes." And so I said, "How?" And Dalen's response was, "Yo, whenever any of the boys would roll in my room wanting to go up to some party or some shit, I would say, nah, I got to watch me some One Piece." And from there, I died. My soul is still in that fucking speakeasy in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, because it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard out of another person's mouth in my life.
Yeah, that's why I love Dalen too. The
I
One
love him
Piece is
so
real,
much.
but not
The One
dinosaurs.
He doesn't believe dinosaurs are real. He also believes that a bee is only a mascot for honey and that bees don't make it.
No, he's been properly educated now.
He has now. But at any rate, Dalen is also one of my favorite human beings on the planet. So there is that too. Again, thank you everybody for 3 years of three of the best years of my life, to be honest, doing this show. Thank you for Bryan for coming on here. Because that means a ton to us. It's not often, and maybe it's probably on us, but it's not often that we get somebody on here that can speak so eloquently about the game and the pieces of the game that matter the most to the players. But having you on here means a lot because it sheds a lot of light on the places we come from and where we end up in this journey through TCGs and through Flesh and Blood and achieving the goal of the game, which is playing great games in person and speaking through the common language of great games. So thank you very much for being here. It can't be expressed any way that would sufficely, speak to how much it means. Derek, I know I don't say this enough, and that's on me, but I appreciate you stepping in when this show could have easily just stopped. 2 years ago when things went south with the original hosts, you came in here, you stepped up, and you've given me so much joy. But to that end, Bryan, where can they find you if they want to talk to Bryan Gottlieb and have him read something? What should they do?
I did recently commit that I would read every post on Bluesky with the hashtag FaBTCG tag. So you can just talk about Flesh and Blood and I'll see it. That works.
That works.
You can message me on that platform. I probably won't respond. I try not to respond to individual things. Please don't take it personally. I just can't go down that rabbit hole. And it's a shame for so many who just want a simple answer and a quick conversation, but I can't help myself and I get pulled in very quickly. So I've set some limits around how I engage in platforms. So I hope y'all can accept that. And I'm always willing to have a conversation in person. That's why I try to go to so many of these things. And yes, my time is tight, but if I have a second, I will absolutely give it to you always. No matter what you want to talk about, as long as it relates to Flesh and Blood. It doesn't even have to relate to Flesh and Blood. For some reason, you want to talk to me about something else, I will always do my best to make a minute for you at all of these shows. And if I can't in the second, I'll try and come back around and find you. I really will. It means a lot to me that y'all even want to connect with me at these things. So don't ever be shy. And that is my recommended point of contact these days. Let's do it in the Flesh and Blood. That's the best way to do it.
Heard and respected. Derek, where can they find you?
Just don't.
Well, that took a turn. You want to expound on that, or are you just good?
Look, if you're the kind of person who is okay with just finding a dead body, that's on you. But otherwise, I guess, I'm far more active on Bluesky now because everybody finally gave me a reason to not be active in the other place. So there, our Discord's always the great way to get a hold of me at events. I'll say at events in 2025, because even though I am going to be at Chicago one way or another, my travel for this year has just been so bad.
Let's not talk about it. Let's not talk about it.
Cursed. So next year,
let's not talk about you vomiting in Italian restaurants.
Next year, I'm owed. So next year is going to be flawless. Pristine.
We're due.
Yes.
Are you saying we're due?
To quote good friend Mikey Torek, we're due. So next year, at as many events as I attend, come say hello.
So Charmer's going to tempt the gambler's fallacy. If you want to find me, you can just find us on Bluesky. That's probably the best thing to do anymore. It feels like the Fab community has decided that that's where we reside. And you know what? I applaud that. So if you are coming over to Bluesky for the first time, the first thing you should do is follow Loose Leaf Tea and find his Fab starter pack and follow everybody there. The second thing you should do is follow Marceline Fangmeyer if you have not, Marina, and that will get you the rest of the way there, because those two have shepherded that community on Blue Sky in an exceptional way. So do those two things, you'll get where you're going. If you need to find me personally, it's at Logan Peterson on Blue Sky. It's at Flesh and Pod on Blue Sky. Very easy if you need to send us an email, which people do now. It creeps me out. But you can find us at fleshandpod@gmail.com. If you want to become a member of the Patreon, it's patreon.com/fleshandpod. All these links are in the show notes. So just, read show notes for once. And somebody did, and they called out the fact that I had been leaving Doa's name in place of Charmers, and they finally caught on like 6 weeks later. But I want to thank everybody again from the bottom of my heart. It's honestly, the last 3 years have been great, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So there's that. But at the end of this, thank you so much for listening, and we will be here next week. So talk to you then. Bye.